You know, they say that there's nothing more comforting than a family Christmas dinner, surrounded by everyone you love, sharing stories and laughs. But I'm telling you this, sometimes the past won't let go. Even in the brightest lights of the holiday season, sometimes it comes back, sitting right there at the table with you, waiting to be seen. That's exactly what happened to my grandmother, Margaret. You probably won't believe this story, and honestly, I don't blame you. It sounds crazy. But what I'm about to tell you happened on Christmas Eve, and I saw it with my own eyes. There's a reason she warned us never to speak of it. But after last year, I think it's time someone knows. Every year, our family gathers at her old Victorian house, a place that looks like it belongs in a horror movie. Creaking floors, flickering lights, everything. But we love it. It's tradition. This time, though, things felt different. My grandma looked distant, and as we ate, I could tell she wasn't listening. She kept staring out the window towards the snow-covered woods. Then, at the table, she said something that chilled me to the bone. "He's back." Now, we're a small family, so this wasn't some random guest. I asked her, "Who's back?" She paused, then leaned in like she was sharing a secret she'd been holding for years. And that's when she told us something I'll never forget. There was a boy who used to come to their family's Christmas gatherings, a kid she'd known when she was a little girl. She said he'd disappeared one Christmas Eve, gone without a trace in the woods. His name was Thomas, but she always called him Tommy. No one knew where he went, but the rumor in town was that he'd frozen to death in those woods, lost and alone. Then my grandma said, "Every Christmas I hear him singing." We all exchanged looks, half terrified, half disbelieving. But then it happened. The faintest, most haunting sound came drifting from the woods, the soft voice of a child singing, echoing through the winter air. No one else at the table seemed to hear it, except for my grandma and me. She looked at me, and I saw this haunted look in her eyes. "Do you hear him too?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, and she took my hand, squeezing it hard. "I have to find him," she said. "This time I can't ignore it." We grabbed flashlights, bundled up, and set off toward the woods. My family thought we were crazy, but I had to go. My grandma's voice was filled with a desperation that terrified me. We trudged through the snow, following that ghostly voice, each verse louder than the last, until we reached an old, gnarled tree deep in the woods. It was twisted, nearly black in the moonlight, and there, at the base of the tree, was a small wooden cross, a memorial I'd never seen before. She knelt in front of it, her hands trembling. "This is where they found his glove," she whispered. As she reached out to touch it, I felt a sudden, ice-cold wind whip through the trees. And in that instant, I saw something I will never be able to explain. A shadow, a child's silhouette, stood beside the tree, his face pale, eyes wide with an expression of pure sorrow. He looked straight at my grandmother, his mouth moving, but no words came out. Then, just as quickly, he vanished. I thought it was over, that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I noticed my grandmother still kneeling, staring at her hand. She was holding a small, threadbare glove, Tommy's glove, the very one she told us they never found. We both stumbled back, terrified, and I nearly slipped on the ice. As we turned to leave, I felt her hand go limp in mine. I looked back to see her staring blankly at me, her lips whispering something I could barely make out. "They're all waiting for me," she murmured, her gaze fixed beyond me, as if she was seeing something, or someone. We ran back to the house without saying another word. We tried to forget about it, pretend it never happened. But every year since, on Christmas Eve, we hear that voice outside her window. Last Christmas, though, the singing came from inside the house, and as I looked around the room, everyone was still at the table except for my grandma. No one saw her leave. She was never found. They say singing Christmas carols is all about spreading joy and warmth. But if you ask anyone from my hometown, they'll tell you that there's one carol you never sing, especially not on Christmas Eve. It's been nearly 20 years since the last person tried. And let's just say, we still don't know where they went. I know it sounds like one of those urban legends, but this is real. It's called The Last Carol of St. Nicholas, and if you ask the older folks, they'll tell you to stay away from it. It's a simple, haunting tune, one the carolers here don't dare sing anymore. The story goes that 100 years ago, a group of carolers disappeared after singing it. And every few decades, like clockwork, people vanish again. It always happens the same way, late at night, near the old church on the edge of town, where the snow seems darker and the air colder than anywhere else. I didn't believe any of it, not until last year. I was a journalist trying to dig up a Christmas story with a twist, and this felt perfect. I'd always had a taste for the morbid, and what better way to stand out than by getting to the bottom of this town's oldest mystery? I convinced a group of local carolers to sing it with me, thinking maybe I'd find some quirky local explanation, or at the very least get a chilling story for my paper. So there we were, bundled up on Christmas Eve, trudging through snow toward the abandoned church at midnight. Everything about it felt wrong. The trees cast weird, long shadows, and the snow muffled every sound, like the world itself was holding its breath. As we reached the church, the wind suddenly died, leaving an eerie silence. It felt like stepping into a tomb. The others looked at me, half joking, half serious, asking if we should really do this. I laughed, brushing it off, saying it was all superstition. We gathered in a circle, took a deep breath, and started singing The Last Carol of St. Nicholas. And that's when it happened. The carol was beautiful, haunting, a melody you feel deep in your bones, even if you've never heard it before. But as we sang, the church doors creaked open on their own. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice shook. The others shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances, but I pushed them to keep singing. That's when the whispers started. Soft at first, like a distant echo, then louder, swirling around us. They seemed to come from all sides, yet there was no one else there. I felt this urge to go inside the church, like something was pulling me, dragging me closer. I looked at the others, their faces pale in the moonlight, and they looked back at me, equally terrified. But none of us could stop singing. Our voices grew quieter, fading to whispers, but we kept going, each verse echoing into the dark. Then I saw him, a tall, shadowy figure standing in the doorway, dressed in the old garb of St. Nicholas, with a twisted smile frozen on his face. His eyes were dark hollows, empty, staring right through me. He held a list in his hand, yellowed and cracked, with writing so old it looked like it might crumble to dust. One by one, he started whispering our names, every caroler in our group. My heart pounded as he looked right at me, his smile widening. And then, he read my name. Luke. I froze. That's when I realized this was no legend, no ghost story. The whispers grew louder, swelling to a crescendo, and as I glanced at the others, I realized I was standing alone. The others had vanished, gone without a sound. I was completely alone in that freezing darkness, facing the figure of St. Nicholas and his terrible, silent grin. Panicked, I turned and sprinted back down the path, slipping in the snow, desperate to escape. When I looked back, the church and the figure were gone, like they'd never been there. No one ever saw the other carolers again. I reported them missing, but the townspeople just shook their heads, muttering about the curse. I was the only one left who knew what had happened, but even now, I'm not sure I believe it. All I know is that every Christmas Eve I hear that song again, drifting through the cold air near the church. And last Christmas, I found a note under my door, written in cracked yellowed ink. "We'll finish the song, Luke. It's your turn." You've probably heard 1,000 Christmas stories, right? Warm tales of family, joy, and togetherness. But this one isn't like that. And if you have a soft spot for holiday cheer, maybe you'd better stop reading here. Because this is the Christmas story my family doesn't talk about. The Christmas we found out that not everyone at the table was alive. But there was one Christmas Eve tradition that made everyone a little uneasy. Something my grandmother called the empty seat. See, at the far end of the table, my grandmother would always set an extra place. No plate, no silverware, just an empty chair with a single candle flickering in front of it. Every year we'd ask her why, and she'd just smile, saying it was for someone special who might join us one day. As kids, we thought it was kind of fun, maybe even exciting. We'd toss around theories about the mysterious guest who might someday show up for Christmas dinner. But as I got older, the empty seat started to give me chills. It wasn't like she'd set it up for a family member who couldn't make it. No one ever mentioned who it was for. And every year, without fail, my grandmother would glance at that chair with this strange, almost expectant look, like she really thought someone would be sitting there any minute. Then a few years back, my grandmother passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack right before Thanksgiving. The whole family was devastated, and the thought of Christmas without her was unthinkable. But my mother insisted we continue the tradition, including the empty seat. So we set the chair just as my grandmother always had, placing the candle in front of it. Christmas Eve came, and for the first time, my mother took up the role of family storyteller. She didn't have Grandma's gift for it, but she tried, sharing old family tales and coaxing us to laugh even though the room felt emptier than ever. I remember thinking how strange it was that no one looked at the empty seat that night, as though they were all too afraid. Until my Aunt Mary leaned over and whispered, "Did anyone else see that?" We all froze. My Aunt Mary wasn't the type to make jokes, especially not about something like this. But she had this look in her eyes that told me she was dead serious. She said, "I thought I saw someone, just for a second, sitting in the empty seat." Everyone exchanged uneasy glances, and my mother tried to brush it off, saying maybe it was the light or a trick of the shadows. But then my cousin Mike chimed in, saying he'd thought he saw something too, a flicker of movement just on the edge of his vision, like someone had been sitting there and disappeared the moment he looked over. I laughed it off, thinking it was all nerves and grief playing tricks on us. But then I noticed something I still can't explain. The candle, the one in front of the empty seat, had melted completely, the wax pooling in a solid circle. All the other candles on the table were still tall and only half burned. By now, the tension in the room was thick. Someone suggested maybe we should blow out the candles and call it a night. My mother nodded, but as she reached over to blow out the candle at the empty seat, something strange happened. The flame. It flared up, brighter and taller than I'd ever seen a candle burn, like it was fighting her. And then, we all heard it. A faint voice, barely a whisper, coming from the empty chair. "Thank you for waiting." It was my grandmother's voice. Everyone froze. I could see the fear in my mother's eyes, her hand still hovering over the candle. Then, just as quickly as it flared up, the flame died down, and the room was silent. No one moved. No one dared breathe. Then, the candle snuffed out on its own. It took a few moments, but slowly, one by one, everyone stood up, grabbing coats, making excuses. The evening was over. No one wanted to be the last one in that room. I remember my mom's face as she locked the front door, pale and shaken. No one ever spoke about it again, and the following Christmas, we didn't set the empty seat. And now, every Christmas, I wonder, who was really waiting? Everyone thinks Christmas is a time for joy and cheer. But for me, it became a night of terror when I learned that some Christmas spirits don't come with good intentions. What I found in the attic that fateful night changed my understanding of the holiday forever. It was Christmas Eve, and the excitement in the air was palpable. The smell of pine from our freshly cut tree filled the living room, mingling with the scent of cookies baking in the oven. My family was bustling about, preparing for our annual holiday gathering. It was a tradition steeped in laughter, warmth, and the kind of love that only comes from being together. But beneath the surface of this cheerful facade, something dark lingered. As a child, I'd often heard the whispers about our old Victorian house. The stories of a ghostly figure seen roaming the halls, particularly around Christmas, had become part of our family lore. My grandmother had always dismissed these tales, claiming they were just fabrications designed to frighten children. But that Christmas Eve, I felt an undeniable pull to the attic, a place I had always avoided. After dinner, while the adults exchanged stories by the fire, I slipped away. The attic door creaked as I opened it, revealing a dusty, dimly lit space filled with forgotten memories. I'd never ventured up there alone, but something urged me to explore. The air felt electric, charged with the whispers of the past. As I stepped inside, I saw old boxes filled with decorations and faded family photographs. But in the corner, something caught my eye. A large, ornate mirror that had been covered with a tattered sheet. My heart raced as I approached it. I could feel a chill emanating from its surface, and as I pulled the sheet away, a fog enveloped the glass. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease that crept into my chest. I turned back to the mirror, and to my shock, I saw a reflection that wasn't my own. The figure was tall and draped in a flowing white gown, its features obscured by a veil. The face was pale, yet eerily beautiful. My heart pounded as I realized it wasn't just a reflection, it was a ghost, a Christmas spirit trapped within the glass. "Help me," the ghost whispered, her voice echoing in the attic, sending chills down my spine. "You must break the curse." "What curse?" I stammered, unable to tear my eyes away from her haunting gaze. "Every Christmas, I am bound to this mirror, unable to find peace," she explained, her voice trembling. "A terrible secret lies within your family, one that must be revealed before midnight strikes." My mind raced. I'd always been told that our family history was steeped in love and joy, but the thought of a dark secret sent my imagination into overdrive. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your great-grandmother made a terrible sacrifice to keep our family safe, a choice that doomed me. If you uncover the truth before the clock strikes 12, I can finally be free." As she spoke, the clock in the hallway chimed, reminding me how little time I had. Panic surged through me, but I knew I had to find out what had happened. I ran downstairs, my heart racing, and found my mother alone in the kitchen. "Mom, do you know anything about our family history? About great-grandma?" I blurted out, urgency spilling from my lips. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she paused as if weighing her words. "Your great-grandmother was a kind woman, but she had her secrets," she said cautiously. "She lost someone dear to her, and it changed her." "Lost who?" I pressed, my mind racing with possibilities. My mother took a deep breath, glancing at the clock. "She lost her sister in a tragic accident on Christmas Eve many years ago. It was said that she tried to bring her back with a forbidden ritual. It worked, but at a terrible cost. Her sister was never the same and disappeared soon after." As her words sunk in, I felt a rush of realization. The ghost in the mirror must have been her sister, trapped by the consequences of that fateful night. "What happened to her?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She was lost to us, both in body and spirit. Your great-grandmother carried that burden until her dying day, believing she could never atone for what she had done," my mother confessed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Time was running out. I rushed back to the attic, my heart pounding, and faced the mirror once more. "I know your story now," I said, desperation in my voice, "but how can I help you?" "Find the locket," she urged, her form shimmering. "The locket holds the key to my freedom." In a frenzy, I searched the attic, tearing through boxes until I found a small, ornate locket buried under old clothes. As I opened it, I was met with a faded photograph of the ghost and a young girl who looked just like her. This was her sister. As I held the locket, the ghost's presence intensified. "You must forgive, and you must remember," she whispered, her voice echoing through the attic. With the clock striking midnight, I closed my eyes and thought of my family, the love we shared, the laughter, and the warmth of the holidays. "I forgive you," I whispered, not only to the ghost, but to my great-grandmother for her choices. To the spirit lost in time, "I remember you." In that moment, the mirror began to shimmer, the fog swirling away. The ghost smiled, a serene expression washing over her face. "Thank you," she said softly, her form dissolving into light. The mirror faded away, leaving me alone in the attic, filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. I stepped back downstairs, feeling the weight of generations lift from my shoulders. As I rejoined my family, the warmth of the room enveloped me, and the laughter of my loved ones felt different, brighter, more vibrant. I had broken the curse, and in doing so, I had reclaimed a piece of our family history. Now, every Christmas, we remember not just the joy and love, but also the stories of those who came before us, their sacrifices, their struggles, and their spirits that linger on, watching over us during the most magical time of the year. If you're brave enough to dive deeper into the world of chilling tales and eerie encounters, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. And if you want to explore even more of the supernatural this season, click the top left corner for our playlist of terrifying tales. Who knows what dark secrets await?